Hoş geldiniz. Subaş bu ben. British Council Türkiye Sanat Müdürüyüm. Aynı zamanda genişletilmiş Avrupa bölgesinin eşitlik, çeşitlilik, kapsayıcılık sorumlusuyum. Unlimited Forum Herkes için Sanat Festivalimize hoş geldiniz. Hem bugün Yapı Kredi Monteada'da şu an bizimle olan hem de YouTube kanalından bizi izleyen herkese kocaman bir hoş geldiniz. Teşekkür ederiz bu cuma öğleden sonrasını bize geçirmeye karar verdiğiniz için. Ben biraz nerede olduğumuzu betimleyeceğim, sonra kendimi betimleyeceğim. Kısa sürecek bunlar. Günün akışının üstünden geçeceğim ve sözü panelimize bırakacağım. Şu an eski bir bira fabrikasının binasında olduğumuz için biraz daha endüstriyel bir yapı. 200 metre, yok daha büyük galiba, 250 metrekare gibi bir alandayız. Yaklaşık 60-70 kişi var salonda. 2 metrede bir kolonlar var, tahta kolonlar var. Ben sahnenin önünde duruyorum. Arkamda 5 tane konuşmacı oturuyor. Arkalarında da bizim festivalin renkleri yeşil değil, sarı, beyaz ve mor renklerinde de bir backdrop var. Sahnenin sağında işaretli tercümanımız ve arkasında da canlı altyazı görebiliyorsunuz. Dolayısıyla işaret dili veya canlı altyazıyı takip etmek isterseniz sizin solunuza doğru oturursanız çok seviniriz. Salon içinde rahat bir ortam yaratmaya çalıştık. Dolayısıyla konuşmalar sırasında kalkabilirsiniz. Arkada kahve ve çay ikramı var ve su ikramı var. Hani kullanabilirsiniz. Ama rahat olalım. Hepimiz, herkes kendi gibi olsun istiyoruz. O yüzden rahat olun lütfen.
And that, let me describe myself. I am a short, dark-haired, white female. I'm basically in my 40s and 170 centimeters high. I have a gray sweater. I have green boots and black jeans. And this is being broadcast live on YouTube. And I'd like to talk about the access on YouTube. It's on the British Council Turkey YouTube channel. This is being broadcast. We're going to have Turkish and English subtitles. We're going to have broadcast in both languages as well. So we're going to have a live broadcast. And to access the live subtitles, on the description side of YouTube, you have the necessary information. And if you have any question, or if you want to shoot the question to the panel, please do use the comment on YouTube. And let me talk about the festival a little bit. So the motto, art for everyone, is very important for us as British Council Turkey. In every activity, in the examinations, English, not just in the arts department, we want to have everyone. We want to provide access to everyone. So it is basically specifically access for the handicapped people, and we want to overflow in central places like Istanbul and reach out to other places. So our digital broadcasting in this regard is very important. So in this festival, we're gonna discuss what we can actualize this vision in art. We had a beautiful opening last night, and we had a chance to listen to Tom from Threats Hero. We talked about the urgency and access. We talked about what we could do for the handicapped artist, and she basically provided a very impressive talk. And we have Arada Company under the direction of Serkan Bozkurt. We had the chance to watch a new game, Urgent. We had young artists who performed for the first time, and then as cultural institutions, how can we open spaces for each other, and how can we learn from each other? How can we hear each other? So this is the kind of festival that we want to have. In the panels today, we're going to have great examples from Turkey. We're going to see what's being done in Istanbul and elsewhere. In the second panel, We're going to have examples from Georgia, Ukraine, UK, and Serbia. So we're going to listen to good examples, and we're going to focus on how to be inclusive in the dance. So accessible art, is it really a myth or can it be real? We're going to discuss this as well. So the first panel is entitled, What is Access to Culture? I'd like to give the floor to Deniz Yazgan Şenay, our moderator for the day. And I'm going to be silent now. Between the two panels, we're going to have a small concert from Conchilant Trio. Please stay tuned. Hello, I'm lawyer Deniz Yazgan Şenay. I am a registered lawyer at the Istanbul Bar Association, and I'm the Secretary General of the Handicapped People's Rights at the bar. I am a relative to a handicapped. I have a young adult brother, and I am focusing on the handicapped rights and on the situations. I'm focusing on the situations that they are victimized in legal processes. So accessibility and discrimination, well, these are problematic issues in Turkey. And in the needs pyramid of Maslow, we are trying to climb up to the first and second layers. And as legal professionals, we forget a lot in access to culture. And I'd like to thank dear panelists very much for that. Other than the basic rights, the access to social rights are going to be handled today as well.
Teşekkür ederim. Aslına bakarsak
the culture policies, you know, well, the culture policies did not really regard disability a lot, you know, but when we talk about the culture policies, we have to touch upon disability in our field works and legal practices and academic works. We see that disabled people are they're either superhuman, like they're angels, or, you know, they are like regarded as mythical individuals, you know, or in the context of neurodiversity, as the age of the disabled individual increases, there's an inclusion, there's an exclusion from the society, and they are regarded as excluded individuals. Sometimes people see the disabled people as trouble, or subhuman individuals. So we have in the Constitution, we don't have any issue the disabled individuals being human, right? So in front in the courts, in the legal context, we're all equals. But there is a problematic concept, disadvantaged individual, and the disabled people are regarded as such. Regarding the access to culture, you know, we need to touch upon culture policies of UNESCO, you know, about action or inaction. Some actions are basically confining the disabled people to the private realm, to the house, basically. And inaction has to do with the law being practiced, you know, for its practice is basically being delayed every time for 4 years. So access to something for the disabled people, you know, from point A to point B, the requirements are being postponed. So the accessibility, basically regarding the Şişli district municipality, yes, accessibility is focusing on disability today, yes, but if there is any difference, you know, if a person is easily falling into the voids of the constructions, for example, that is on the one side. If Istanbul is a venue for arts and culture, you know, we need to have access to these activities as well, because culture in the last 5-7 years is being left to creative ideas of the private individuals and enterprises. Of course, there are things that are being done, but how sufficient they are? Well, not much. For that reason, we have entrepreneurs in this sector. So we have individuals that also trigger the public sector with their activities as well. And I'm happy to be with them because I am a defender of neurodiversity. I'd like to say that, an autistic individual, for example, could be disturbed by the light or the microphone voices, and sometimes they need to express themselves with voices, so we're not going to be disturbed. I mean, we're not going to turn our heads and look at them. So this is the kind of the atmosphere that we are trying to create, because one of the biggest issues that we have in access to culture is that we basically push the disabled people to mask their situation. Do not swing, cover your mouth, do not look at that individual or something like that. We're limiting them basically. And then, so this is basically preventing them from enjoying the artistic performances. And before opening the floor, we have an exclusionary situation in cultural activities, and I'd like to remove this one, and the sure-footedness is what we're talking about.
Daha doğrusu bir ortamı engellinin girişine yönelik hazırlamamaktan tutun da
Rather than preparing an atmosphere, an environment for the disabled individuals, we basically have a lot of disregard that includes excluding sign interpreters, for example. So all the moves in this direction reflect as negative words in our life.
cinsiyet normlarına ilişkin olarak hazırladığı çalışmalarda cinsiyet körü uygulamalar olarak.
So looking into the practice, we see a lot of gender blind situations. For example, a woman living in the peripheral parts of the city, let's say this woman cannot leave home and she cannot really have access to downtown places, and the courthouses are in downtown parts of the city. So looking into the literature of human rights, this basically reflects as gender blind, gender disregarding practices. So as we basically take steps into this direction, we favor the healthy individuals. And the human rights protection mechanism is reflecting this as a concept. So what starts in the language, in the linguistic use and cultural diversity, we used to talk about different issues regarding the real politic that Turkey is situated in. It's great to see that we are not disregarding the blindness that are addressed to the disabled people. So we basically utilize interpreters, and through YouTube, we used to watch the old meetings. Having this meeting in Turkey, in Istanbul, and seeing people with us is very important. I'd like to give the floor to panelists now. One of the issues that we'd like to handle is this gathering. And in this gathering, we do live broadcast, and we want to make the environment as accessible as possible. And we basically use alternative text. When British Council uses this material for promotion on their Twitter account, for example, it is important that they basically transfer this visual to us. I forgot to describe myself. I'm a tall woman wearing black all along, and I have brown hair at my shoulder length. I'd like to thank you very much once again with your questions and whatever basically pops up on our mind. We should basically move on in a less than focused manner. You know, the attention is not going to be confined to a human described by Da Vinci. So I'd like to get together on similar days. Thank you very much once again. So access to culture, issues pertaining to that today. Let's see, let's start with what they are doing in practical terms. The things that I care about as a legal professional. I basically dedicate my world to gray areas and covered pitfalls. So in this regard, I'd like to see what you have been doing. Let's start with sharing our ideas regarding the access. Let's get started then. Zeynep, would you like to take the floor first? Of course. Hi, I'm Zeynep Şölen Yıldız. Today, I'm wearing a brown sweater today. I am 110. I'm 28, and I have dark brown hair and brown eyes. I'm representing Theatro Cooperative here, and I'm going to talk about the theater accessibility today. The access to culture is, I'm going to focus on access to theater regarding access to culture. As Deniz mentioned, the issue of favoring healthy individuals, talking about there's a basic concept that, favoring the healthy individual, how we have to fight with that understanding. I think it is important. We basically prefer able-bodied individuals, and there's a character that we envisage regarding the able-bodied favoritism. That individual that we imagine is called Berkecan, and he's a young heterosexual Sunni Muslim, and he is well off. He has a car, 180 centimeters, quite fit individuals, if you will, And as disabled individuals, anyone who's not Berkecan, an overwhelming majority of this room, for example, is basically being impacted by this able favoritism. So as Berkecan walks on the street, when he has access to buildings, for example, we are being exposed to his gazes. He looks at us, and this able favoritism, how frequently we're exposed to that, depends on the situation. But we're all impacted by it as disabled individuals. There is also a cross-sectionality here as well, because in Berkecan's perspective, there is a hierarchical attitude, and I think I can see that through my team. As a team, we have different experiences of disability, and we have non-disabled individuals as well. And when we go to a place, let's say we are going to a cafe, the first person that is addressed is mostly an able-bodied male person. So in our team, it is Mehmet, and the next person to address is an able-bodied female, Eser or Damla, in our team, for example. So if we're together as disabled individuals, for example, Selim is basically addressed. Between Seda and me, I don't know what kind of hierarchy there is. She's taller, so this is why she could be taken more seriously. So this able favoritism is impacting us in such direction. And if we defend accessibility as a human right, we also defend everybody's right, including Berkecan and able favoritism. I'm going to expand on that in its details later, but let me just say that in the project process of Access to Theater, we had a chance to see different halls. The expert individuals could have better opinions on that, but, I don't really know its reasons, but the theaters are mostly situated in Galata, Karaköy, and Taksim, and they are mostly the upper floors of the old buildings. So because of their physical properties and they have this able favoritism and exclusionary attitude towards us. And as we had a conversation with a theater worker, for example, and she told me that it should be the other way around because of the nature of the theater itself. Because theater is very collective and it is something bottom up. If it's not us to be inclusive, then who? He said, she said. So accessibility of theater and culture and art, this able favoritism, when we talk about that, we need to disturb this perspective a little bit, and I think this is a good start. I'm going to expand on what we did in our project, but I'd like to give the floor now to the other panelist.
Sırayla devam ederiz. Buyurun.
Merhabalar, Hakan Elbir ismim.
Hi, my name is Hakan. In the last 20 years, I'm in the sector of culture and art. In the last 10 years, I'm in the Dialogue Museum of Gayrettepe. I'm one of the founders of this museum. On the inclusion and diversity side, I started with my own experiences, and I have a lot of activities to raise awareness. In the last 4 years' time, in the UK, we transferred the project to London, and we're learning about the environment in the UK, and to understand the social enterprise ecosystem better, we're there. Comparing to 20 years ago, regarding the access to culture and arts, we have traveled a long distance. Let's start with the positives. So in panels like that, there's a predisposition of bringing the issues to the fore, but there are positives as well. So we would basically understand the distance that we traveled. In the very essence of the problem, I see that in the last 20 years of experience, we received more than 500,000 visitors. I don't know if anyone from the room visited us, but 9 out of 10 visitors basically said that it was the best experience in their lives. Let me just summarize what it is. The dialogue in the dark. This is the experience that we offer. It's called Dialogue in the Dark. We provide a training to the visually impaired individual and make them tour guides. In a pitch dark, we create a city tour, and we invite people to there. And with a white cane, in a pitch dark, we basically have a tour of Istanbul. It's a very safe environment, by the way. In Dialogue in Silence, an audio impaired individual is basically providing the tour. We see the mimics, gestures, and body language. So as I come from the museum sector, I set out with the realization that one of the basic problems of 21st century is lack of communication. And we basically speak the same language. A lot of times, we still lack communication. Speaking different language is a whole different matter, but in the same country, speaking the same language, but we fail to understand each other. And this is increasing. There are certain reasons for that. looking into the political journey of the world, we see a more polarized planet in an increasing manner. And, people, it basically attracts people to spend time with similar individuals. And this is why we brought this dialogue issue to the fore. Whatever background you come from, could be a culture, religious systems, or whatever background you have, we need to listen to and understand each other. If we do not listen to each other and understand, this lack of communication is going to go forever. And the explosions of anger is going to be very costly for us. So in the last 10 years, the feedback that we receive from the visitors, they verify our thesis. At the end of the day, there's nothing that we can't resolve or share. It is very important that we listen to each other objectively. So the darkness here, blindness, deafness, and silence, we use them as a metaphor, and we use that to convey the message to the visitors. Sometimes they misunderstand us. Do we basically promote the world of the blind or the deaf? No, it's the other way around. We are working with the deaf and the blind, and we use them as role models, and we use those platforms as a means, and the result is great. We started a cooperation in the last November with the Ministry of Education. If we provide awareness at a young age on the individuals, when these individuals turn into employers or parents, they will have a different perspective on life. We have workshops addressing the business world as well. To speak frankly, the business world has a lot of prejudices. Well, the society has, but it's more intense in the business world. So this diversity and inclusion, they use trendy concepts, and they basically create departments to address these issues. But is it really solving the problem? But, I'm not going to name the name now. We had search meetings with the HR managers of the top 50 companies of Turkey. We realized that at a lot of times the job application from a disabled individual ends before it starts. That's what I saw. And the education and awareness, the awareness should be given at an early age. 2030, the UN has SDGs, right? It has to do with the decreasing of the inequalities, right? So what do we do in this context? By the way, it's not limited to Turkey. By the way, I had a lot of observations in the UK as well, and in many countries in Europe. I can say that it's basically a nice to have for them. They're exercising policies just for the sake of it. Other than that, they're not really doing anything practical, because this exclusionary attitude is moving on. When they hire a visually impaired individual, they have a lot of lack of information, for example, providing an equipment for that individual. And the same goes for the deaf individuals, right? They would need certain tools, equipment. So there are a lot of individuals and institutions that refrain from that. But despite all that, I'd like to end in a positive way. This awareness, and as this know-how increases, the cities are turning more accessible, and it means the business workspaces are more accessible as well. For example, we are in a space that is owned by the Metropolitan Municipality. 10 years back, for example, if the accessibility policies of the Metropolitan Municipality was 2 out of 10, it is 7, 8 out of 10 now. So there's a huge inclusionary process going. In your policies on disabled individuals, if you're not involving the disabled individuals at the very outset, it's going to be deficient. It's going to be pointless, because this product or whatever you are to offer is going to be used by these individuals. So we should involve them at the very outset of the process. With that, I'd like to thank British Council who put this panel together. I forgot my own self-description. I have a black sweater. I'm 180. I'm dark-skinned, black hair, and I'm a male. Thank you. Thank you. Ezgi, let's move on with you. I'm Ezgi Yalınalp. I'm Engelsiz Films Festival's founding team. As the Engelsiz, let me just describe myself.
Galiba.
I am a middle height, 164. I am a red hair. I have a light yellow sweater, and I have a skirt and boots. In our festival, you know, this Unhindered Films Festival started like 10 years ago, and we set out with this very idea that can we have a festival that is accessible to everyone? Can we celebrate it all together? We didn't have any idea regarding accessibility back in the time, but we realized that it has become possible. We basically saw that it was possible. The sign language was made possible, and then we have the audio description made possible. So our festival is called Accessible Film Festival. And we started the festival in 2013. Well, it's going to be our 11th year. The festival evolved throughout this time. We evolved as well. And regarding the issue of accessibility, we contacted a lot of people, and we are at a position of a lot of expertise and know-how. Last year, we ran an EU project. There's a network that we have a founder to. We basically created the network of accessible film festivals, and we conducted an EU project together. So we looked into why we can't have access to cinema, and then what are the obstacles on the way to access, and we wanted to gather the shareholders together. What Hakan said is very important. The shareholders should gather together and talk to understand each other. So official public authorities, NGOs, and actors in the cinema, we brought a lot of them together. So this was a long-term project. From puvil.org, you can have access to details. Throughout the years, regarding the issue of accessibility, I have basically learned that able favoritism is a critical matter. And unless we overcome that, we're not going to be able to overcome the other issues. Because what needs to be done is kind of obvious. There are guidelines, there are legal processes displayed, pointed out. So we have it, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. But we have problems in the practice of it. Because stereotyping towards the disabled individuals and able favoritism is still going on. So there are a lot of groups being excluded in Turkey and in the world. If you are a woman, you are basically being excluded. If you have a different sexual orientation, you are being excluded. But the stereotypes against the disabled individuals, well, they are more intense and solid. Even the enlightened, educated people have these attitudes, and this is what I saw in my dialogues with people. Despite the fact that the individual is very intellectual, they basically regard the disabled people as freaks. And then unless we overcome these issues, we're not going to overcome the overall issues. The disabled people are basically being supported. We support the blind and deaf people, and technology has developed a lot in this direction. But it is basically the detail of it, as Hakan mentioned, there are positive developments. Of course, yes, developments are there. Accessible Film Festival is celebrating its 10th year this year, but established festivals like Istanbul film festival, they sometimes have detailed subtitles. And then in Berlin Film Festival, for example, there was an important panel. It was last year. They talked about accessibility issue and the representation of the disabled individuals in the cinema. We were invited as well, and we discussed this issue of ableism. You know, it's just like sexism, ageism, and racism. You know, ableism is also an important issue. I'm not going to repeat the same things, but we need to focus on that issue. Let's. Okay, that would be all that I have to say right now. Hello, I'm Çiğdem Aslantaş. I'm going to start with describing myself.
Bugün üzerimde I'm mid-age woman. I have black dress. I have light brown hair. I'm an internal architect and I'm visiting the different museums around the world. I'm living in Ankara in Nuremberg, and I started to write articles on European museums on my professional life. And so the museum visitors are conceived as persons that are seeing with their eyes, but this has to be 360 degrees visitor experience, how it can be. I started to think about that, and I asked myself, at this moment, I asked myself, what about the people with disabilities? And finally, I returned back to Turkey 3.5 years ago, and I started to work in Ankara in order to open a special museum for disabled people and with a wonderful community. And we have started and we have opened the first experience area for visually impaired people in Turkey. But the public sources were so much badly used because the public sector was working on very important works, but the civil society is working on other issues, and the private sector is working on some other issues. And for this reason, these two different sectors don't come together, and there's so much bad use of resources. And how we can create a model, how can we have a sustainable model? I have started to think about that in order to stop this waste. And for this, at this moment, I started to visit the Ministry of Culture and Ministry of Family and Social Policies. And there are so many museums in Turkey, and many big part of those museums belong to the public. And if there is no public support, it will not be possible to have a very qualified cooperation. For this reason, we seek that the support of the ministries and also with the support of private sector financially. And in the 6th of December, in the 100th year of Anatolian civilizations, we have opened an area space for visually impaired people. It's an area of 300 square meters, and it's a social initiative. And how we can work with all stakeholders, how we can cooperate with them. We have studied very intensively on that, and we made very important studies in order to find an equilibrium between all parties. But what I talk about here is to have a qualified cooperation and to have the right communication with right people in the right distance. And as an architect, as an entrepreneur, I wanted to divide the problem into pieces and to create a qualified result at the end of the process. And after that, if we look to the situation, as a matter of fact, within 7 months in a state museum, within that museum, 7 days a week, there was a big flow of people. We have hosted 15,000 children, for example, but there was alternative experiences over there, and people are visiting more over there. because there is an alternative experience. And museums are a very important place where you can learn the history and all of the stuff. And for this reason, all those areas must be converted into educational areas and organic educational areas and spaces. And then we went to the Ankara painting and sculpture museum. We started to work over there as another initiative, and we wanted to make a description of 50 paintings of Republican period with sign language, and then we thought what we can do, and we cooperated with 6 sign language interpreters and with other art consultants. And in the mid of the February we will share this this study with everyone. What we want here is that we wanted to show that the feasibility of accessibility of the museums by everyone, and by adding every group of disabled individuals, we want to create different experience areas for all of them. For now, what I can say is all this. And so, as you mentioned many different things, and I have new thoughts in my mind. But what I want to say that the prejudices against the disabled people is not about the educational level, but it's about the ableism and it's about the elitism, because they are walking hand in hand in order to make the life put the life in existence. We need to understand the sacrifices, but the sacrifices now are understood as capital sacrifice. But even the USA, the AI based employment mechanisms are given up, because generally the disabled individuals are not employed, and the AIs are also against the disabled persons. That for this reason, in USA they stopped to work with AI in HR area, and these bots, they can become these bots, computer bots, anti-Semitics and anti-disabled individuals. And so we need to understand this on the basis of developing policies, and so I want to give an example on the access to culture. And today, if you visit the official Gazette website of Turkey, you will see a communique over there, and it's a national action plan for disabled people from 2023 to 2025. And also we had an autism action plan that used to put into action into 2019, but it was never applied. But this is this is an action plan that is claiming that will be a part of the life of the disabled people. But all this placed on the official Gazette in a scanned manner, and it is not a PDF file. But it means that the visually impaired people are not able to reach to these scanned documents. Maybe you may not know it, but they are not able to read it, because their software, they are not able to comprehend it. So you have so many documents, and you have the PDF version. Instead of having a PDF version on the site, they have the scanned version. And on the website of Ministry of Family, they say that it is accessible, but it is not accessible as a matter of fact. You can also even check right now. When I went to that website, I saw that we are not able to make plans in Turkey. We're not able to plan how to access some certain things. And another thing is about the accessibility to culture, and it's a derogative thing. So the cultural access of disabled people are sometimes taken as in a wider space, but generally they take into consideration the sport activities. For example, they will access to swimming complexes very easily, etc. Sustainability, inclusivity, and all this terminology, they are not understood very well. They are already consumed by us, as in the dialogue museum. So there should be some profound studies, but unfortunately, today disabled individuals, everyone is a candidate of becoming a disabled individual. This is a motto in Turkey, but it means that people put into fear uh, regarding this situation, and this is a big expenditure, and and this is this is some expression or wrong expression, and I think this is a big problem. I think all this create big problem because the ableism issue is also an explanation. It's something that we are getting from medical aspect. We are taking that disabled person in front of us and we are trying to understand who is the disabled person and we are describing that person. It's about the autistic persons and also physical disabilities, or if somebody so the able's ableism explaining. And regarding the accessibility to culture, and for example, the projects are generally taken into consideration from different dimensions, and at the end of the day, they disregard and these disabled persons within those projects. And so, for example, they humiliate those people. They write down some phrases telling that the disabled persons cannot do this, cannot do that. And within our talks, we should have a certain filter because it's a lifelong practice. Because first of all, in our lives, for example, with their yellings, with their sounds, they are they're externalized from society, and they are stopped to be together with children in their apartments. They are stopped, and when they go to the park, because since they look different, since they make different sounds, people stop the children from playing to with those children. And then the play rights of the disabled child, for example, this is a basic right, because that child has to this for example, the play therapy is based on that, but we see that the disabled child is not able to play, and is a typical situation. And generally the disabled child is does not have this right of play, and also the educational right, not being able to be inside the class, to put place on the very backside in the classroom, is when we need to understand the access to culture based on all these previous situations. And also this is based on the Human Rights Act, Article 8, because the person must have an environment in order to develop his or her own access to culture. And for this reason, in order to make it much more concrete, I want to learn some certain information from you, some more detailed information from you, and I want to learn what you are doing in these fields. So we are a team that is working very hardly on culture and arts, on accessibility, and as you mentioned, as a matter of fact, the accessibility, the culture and art is an area which is so much externalized field, And for this reason, we started to work with different museums, with different festivals, and also today we came together with the theater cooperative. I want to mention about this cooperative for theatrical acts, and there are more than 70 theaters, private theaters is inside this cooperative. And in order to make visible these problems, they work on the issues, the accessibility and other things, and those they are working on enabling their services to be more comprehensive and more inclusive. And we came together with this team and we started to think how we can make real and accessible theater. And 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 from our first meeting, we started to think on how to do all the theaters accessible, but it was so hard. It needed high budgets, high level of money, and for the reason we have divided them in stages. Now we are in the first stage. In the first stage, we started to understand how we can overcome this ableism look to the ableism aspect. But in future stages, we are planning to have concrete results. In order to, we are talking about how we can change this kind of approach, and within this theater cooperative, this accessible theater. So all are we have 10 theaters that are a part of this initiative, and we have visited those theaters and with our teams with having different disabilities, and at the same and also the social accessibility and communicational accessibility also taken into account by us. And we started to give some small trainings to the directors of those theater companies, and we tried to explain our experiences, and we gathered all together and we have tried to explain and talk to, and discuss with them what is an accessible theater. And for this reason, the field workers and the theater workers, in order to understand their experiences, we made a small questionnaire before our visits, and then afterwards we asked them what is accessibility according to you, how it can be in your theater, what kind of problems you have in your field, in your working area regarding the accessibility. And another question, if we solve all these problems, would the frequency of disabled people would increase to theaters? And then, so we have very fresh results, and we will also share those results with you, the results of these questionnaires. We have a before questionnaire and after questionnaire, and as a matter of fact, the theater workers, of course, they generally are aware what is an accessible theater, and they know what kind of impediments are present in their stages. And but they are thinking like this: yes, accessibility of course must be enabled, but already we are theaters, we have limited financial resources, we don't have time, we don't have resources, and for this reason we are not able to dream to enable this kind of accessibility to disabled persons. But the biggest experience has been to come together, to think together with them. It is not so easy yet, but we can do it. We can look for funds, we can search for physical transformation, and we started to think on how people can access to the content of the place, and they try to some generate some solutions in their minds, and there have been so many theater companies in order to make this, and we have seen that they can be motivated, and it's not it is not an utopia, and this is a doable thing. And secondly, the individuals that are impeded, that are these maybe those disabled individuals may not be so interested in theaters. They may not come to our place. Those theater workers thinking like this. After those interactions, they started to think that yes, we have to strive, we have to show effort to give them to make our places much more accessible, and at the end they will come. And this has been, I think, has been a big change. What we did here just was making a gathering to have a conversation with them, and we as the erişilebilir her şey, everything accessible team, we wanted to look again to their activities, to their place again from another perspective. And in the future stages of our project, we will also apply all what we have learned, and we will also convey all the learnings to the Ministry of Culture and to other theaters, and how can be a theater accessible by disabled person will be the title. And we want to make concrete steps also on this issue. Now, the floor is yours. Okay, the access to culture, the consumer of the culture. This is an aspect, but then there is the producer of the culture, and there's another aspect. 2 years ago, I met with a tango instructor, and he was in our museum, and he wanted to meet with us. She wanted to meet with us, Miss Elif, and the tango instructor Elif wanted to meet with us, and she thought how they can implement all of this for disabled individuals. So she was asking if we can do a tango performance with all visually impaired people or not. And since I was another level, I I told her that we can also include the hearing impaired people, the deaf people, and Miss Elif, the professor Elif, was so surprised the tango instructor, because I have worked for all those years. I never instructed a visually impaired person or a deaf person. I can never even imagine to teach tango to a deaf person. And at the end, uh, so they went to Soho show arena with their families, and they made a performance with deaf and blind people, and they made a show. And yes, they say that the art does not have limits. These are stereotype, some mottos, but also the visual and the media must also be criticized from this point of view, because all the time they were using some language of pity and some that then and this but these people, these 8 individuals, they made so great performance. It has been a beautiful memory for them, and some of them they continue to dance. And for example, Harun last night has been the part of this performance, and for this reason, the culture consumer is very important, but the producers of culture are not seen so much deeply. That can be LGBTQ, and so there can be some marginal people coming, or some people that are thinking that they are not represented except the disabled people and the others, or the externalized people. All these all these people that are generating art, so they don't have spaces to put and to show all their production. And we have a dialogue up in London last year, and so we wanted to meet with those people, and we wanted to offer our space to them. And there has been hundreds of applications, and our location is very small. And this also, we had a cooperation with the local municipality and different groups, different background, people from different backgrounds, they came here. And the common ground was that they were telling that they have problems during the generation of the art, but there's the artistic residency programs, but those programs are programs for healthy artists. There can be some exceptions, but these producers, of course, they can produce some art, some sculpture or some other thing. But at the moment that the artist becomes so happy is to show their products to the viewers. I'm as a former Para Museum manager. It has been 20 years. We have to also take into consideration the generators and producers of the culture. Thank you.
Tunuz için ben de o kısmına biraz
As we talk about the access to culture, this is why I focused on that issue. You know, it's an important matter what we mean by access to culture, because some of the audience that we have here, they are very well versed on that issue, but some of them are not really that familiar. So what do we mean by access to culture? So it's not just about people with, obstacles or disabilities. We have invisible disabilities as well. A senior citizen, for example, or a person with autism or deafness or blindness. So when we speak of accessibility, it's a broad issue. Fully accessible, I don't really believe that there is a fully accessible activity of culture and arts. For example, we have accessible film festivals, right? We have audio description, and we have the detailed subtitle and sign language as well. We have access to the space for orthopedically disabled individuals, and for autistic people, we have other exhibitions. Let's say we have someone with epilepsy and we follow a Gaspar Noé film. We have flashes and everything. Epilepsy is triggered, so we need to place a warning there, and we learn that in time, So every group has a different need. Of course, this is a journey without an end. So for deaf individuals, for example, they have a lot of issues in communication. There's a content on the website or a video content, for example, they may not be able to understand it. And you need to be very active at that moment. So all the communication channels must be accessible. A deaf individual, for example, when he or she goes to a movie theater, it shouldn't be a problem to get the ticket, right? So we're talking about a multidimensional issue. So starting from my own experiences, there are some striking examples. I wanted to give you some. Last year, Breaking the Cycle, the Accessible Cinema project, we basically had a workshop on equal access to cinema, and we invited public institutions, policymakers, representatives of the cinema, the directors, producers, etc. And we invited NGOs working in the field of accessibility. And there was this thing, and it was very striking if you ask me. I'm not going to name the name now, but a festival organizer, a friend of ours, told to an NGO, you basically establish a political party and speak your concerns there. So this was basically far beyond his boundaries, but it basically reflects a mindset, how urgent we need to change that mindset. It was a striking example to that. I've been exposed to examples like that all the time. I'm positive you've had something like that as well. So this ableism issue, Çiğdem has given a good example, for those who are blind at the birth. I think there were two individuals, they are placed a chip, and then the vision is kind of abled, but in 2 years' time they commit suicide. They have a different world, and as people with five senses, we force them to see or hear in a certain manner. But those individuals, in the life that they establish, they can exist. This is how ableism plays in. Well, with that, I'd like to give the floor to you now.
Aslında tam seni bırak.
Let me take where you left. I see this as an adventure of enterprise. I'm not really an NGO individual, NGO worker. I'm an architect that gathered together with civil society to resolve this issue. So in this journey, I accepted that I need to take the first step to the best that I can. And, in this process, we faced a lot of walls. And the first walls, basically, they came from the people that I thought would be sensitive to the issue. The walls showed up like, we must do this, must do that, must go there, kind of things like that. And, I basically, the first area that I came across was the visually impairment. And then we focused on activation of different senses. And very basically, I saw that, if I didn't have the talent in a specific issue, I never went into this direction. So I had a methodology to go with who can. And this made our job a lot easier. Because for about 17 years, I've been working in construction sites. My whole life took place in the production areas. So the raw material, the processes, the nature of the things, how they must be. I'm coming from a discipline that the care is very important. This is why I listen to all the discussions, but when I don't see concrete examples to what's being discussed, it sounds like waste of time to me. So placing a concrete example that could be owned up by the public authorities is very important, and this is what we wanted to do. And it started with a dialogue that would include everyone. Perhaps we should talk about the issue of accessibility from that point. In the process of 3.5 years, we created a dialogue and process that would involve everyone. We had maintained the same distance with civil society because toxic relations are there as well. It's everywhere. But with valuable togetherness, we can develop this process. The waste of resources is very important. Everyone that I met was very valuable, but we didn't have the practice. We still don't have the practice of doing things together. I basically am critical towards myself that we need to create a qualified version of togetherness. So inclusiveness and accessibility starts from the nearest. We should provide access to the nearest individuals and institutions, and then the rest is going to follow that. I do agree. And, ableism, and there are ableist enterprises as well. Perhaps the most important one is that despite mental or not, the disabled individuals, according to the able individuals, disabled individuals do not really understand properly. So it's not dumbing down, sometimes they speak to the disabled individuals with a childish tone of the voice. So when we render things accessible, for example, if we're talking about a multidimensional discourse, we see the didactic attitudes, you know. What do we mean by that? What do you understand out of that? It's not that, you know, we need to gather together more frequently and have a multiplicity of voice. So the issue of ableism, societal ableism, you know, every element in the society, including the producers of the art, they basically are pushed to ignore the disabled individuals. So they think that disabled individuals would not really have a good sense of art. A disabled individual is not going to be able to go there. So talking about that goes through more experience. Yes, you know, we cannot really resolve certain issues of linguistics just by talking, but a key element here, as in the concept of ableism, you know, we basically translate a lot of these concepts from English or from where they're produced. In English, they have the able bodies, for example. I translate that into Turkish, and then when we say like able bodies in Turkish, there's an imagination out of able bodies, you know. So the perception goes through Berkecan, you know. So the discourse focuses on Berkecan's transfer point from point A to point B. And regarding the access to culture, from where Ezgi left off, by the way, I should say that a lot of things that have been done so far, you know, like ads producers, they basically established a terrible concept. They said that everyone is a candidate disabled person. So we're trying to scrape it, remove it now, but, you know, we can't, because those memorized sentences are showing off. And for that reason, you know, the closest example that is given by Ezgi, you know, they basically say that we should go and establish a political party. So they're basically confining the promotion or advocacy of the disabled individuals to disabled individuals. I don't know if it was the governor or the municipal mayor. They basically yelled out at disabled individuals that individual that, you know, if you're not gonna be able to use these stairs, do not come over here. So there cannot be a discourse to remove these individuals, you know. The issue of access then is very transformative. So with a repair justice system, it should be understood. So the institution that I represent now is Ceviz Autistic Research and Societal Defense, and we work through Philipogrammatica. You know, there is the victim and the perpetrator. There's the victim, and then there's the crime, right? If this crime is not really creating a significant violation of human rights, rather than rejecting people's shareholding position, we should tell them why we are at a different stage now. And we should theorize the world of disability from that point. And in this context, before moving on with the question, I'd like to hear from everyone. How do you describe access to culture? We actually talked about that. You know, maybe there could be a wrap-up. Getting back to ableism, you know, and disabled individual as both the producer and consumer of culture, you know, there's a hideous mechanism moving on. And in the context of accessibility to theater, this is what I wanted to mention. So in this process of theater accessibility, we went to a lot of movie theaters and a lot of plays invited us for theaters, and I realized that I wasn't actually visiting any theaters. It's not really about pandemic. It's the same in the post-pandemic period, because in a lot of cultural areas, I'm trying to be active as an individual, but I realized that most likely at a time when our areas of interest start forming up, this ableist perspective excludes us from certain areas. So we feel that as if these choices are our own. So should I even have hesitate if I should, have advocacy? I'm interested in literature. I do write. Watching a few plays, I thought I should write plays as well. But, it also has to do with me having no access to theater. I pushed it back in my mind. So I had not even thought about being a producer or consumer in the theater process. So on the side of accessibility, perhaps we should see that the process is being transformed. And well, that's all that I have to say. And in the next panels, I hope in the context of erişilebilir her şey, everything accessible, we're going to be able to tell new works that we conduct. Thank you. On the issue of culture, let me present an approach. My observation for 20 years makes this. This is a holistic issue, and on the background, if we don't have any support mechanism or incentives, diversity does not proliferate in culture and art. Let me speak of museum business. In 2005, when Para Museum was being established, in private museums I'm talking about, there was a trend, a political one basically. Turkey was about to join the European Union, and remember there were waiting rooms and things, and Istanbul Modern was established, Para Museum was established, and there was an exhibition on an art of Osman Hamdi, the tortoise trainer, and Rahmi Koç Museum and things like that. And then the trend ended there. The wind stopped because there was a political aim in the background. It ended. They disregard the end user, end consumer, and industrial culture was being disregarded. So this was the political approach back in the time. So we all talk about social enterprise, but when we look into the overall atmosphere, the social enterprise does not even have a legal description, and this creates a lot of issues in access to finance. For example, me and my friends, of course, if without any institution that support us, or without relying on rich families, when we started a dialogue museum, people made fun of us. And they asked us, why do you call it a museum? I am coming from the business. I know what museum is, So the museums preserve, save, and exhibit, right? But it's not just about that. In 21st century, we have venues that have stories. So the museums are turning into social education venues. So we're far beyond the description of museum in 1940s. And ICON, in their August meeting, they changed the definition of museum. They added inclusion, discrimination, empathy, awareness. And I'm not going to be humble here. What we have been saying for 10 years, ICON basically approves them now. So this perspective, stand alone with individual enterprises, we cannot really overcome this perspective. We need to have a culture policy. We need to have incentive mechanisms. And the issue would basically come to the issue of accessibility. I believe the issue is multi-layered. And this panel is very valuable from that point. So this is what I had to say, basically. But such discussions should move forward. Thank you. All right, let me just wrap it up then. So the project that we ran last year was Accessible Cinema, Breaking the Cycle. We chose that because there's a vicious cycle, because the disabled individuals or people without access to culture and arts, why don't they produce in this area? Because they don't have access, and when they don't, the cycle moves on. So the culture policies to support that are lacking, communication is lacking, and ableism and the other things are very much established. And this is a holistic matter, right? We are traveling at a slow speed. It's not going to be resolved overnight, right? So, contribution of
geliyor tabii ki. Onlardan biraz bahsetmek istedim. Hani
contribution of the relevant institutions are very important. Of course, we have good examples as well. Netflix, for example, from this year on, they are making it necessary
ya da işte dünyada
to have subtitles for the productions for Netflix originals. So autism, dementia-friendly exhibitions, pregnancy-friendly exhibitions are moving around. They're expanding, right? So positive things are happening as well. But the shareholders should move and act together. Let that be all that I have to say. I'm a person that is full of hope, as I don't go into any area that I'm not familiar with. Everything sounds familiar, so I like this. And the thing that I could say to wrap it up is that access to culture is not something shattered. We need to look into the issue with a holistic perspective, and this is how we should move forward, because accessibility is not just about the obstacles. Children do not really go into museum either. They're bored, and the senior citizens cannot anyway. So there were a lot of invisible barriers regarding the access to museum. So there's a terrible situation regarding the museums. We are at different perception points, and we have different minds. But fast adaptations for physical solutions should facilitate the issue as a first step. And we are a society as that thinks through concrete terms. So the concrete steps are specifically important here. Thank you. Maybe we can move on with the questions. Any questions?
Benimki soru değil aslında.
Well, it's not a question, but a contribution. I'm coming from Antep. I'm coming from Kırkayak Culture Association. Regarding the access to culture, I'm living in a city of 2.5 million, and 460,000 Syrian refugees are residing in the city. We're organizing a festival since 2011, and Accessible Film Festival, well, with them, we had included accessible films in our festival. So, well, we started with the visually impaired and deaf children. But afterwards, I saw the linguistic obstacle, 460,000 new neighbors, well, Syrian refugees I'm talking about. They don't have access to culture and art because of physical disability. Alongside the physical or visual disability, there was the obstacle of language. So we created a lot of subtitles in Arabic and Turkish, and we tried to create an atmosphere to watch and enjoy films together. So we wanted to provide right to culture and art for everyone, and this started providing a change since 2015. And I realized that language is a political issue. You know, when we translate into Arabic, some directors from Turkey, they didn't give their films. But in time, they realized that it is a human right. I mean, the right to access, right? So in the following period, we used this multilingual situation, and we also had a woman's effort work. It was a video, and we used Turkish, English, Arabic subtitles, and we also added sign language. So for the independent institutions, it's not really easy to finance these activities. Some of these are moving on in a voluntary manner. So can we really overcome the physical obstacles? Well, it's very difficult. Sometimes you are out of options. But the films that we use in the Accessible Film Festival, well, still we have done it better. For the visual disabled people, we went to schools. It's really a difficult thing to bring those children. It's a separate issue. You know, they basically can be transferred with the individual efforts of their teachers. This is what I wanted to share. Thank you. Thank you. You touched upon very important issues, and I'm very happy that this is being recorded as such. You know, it's not really an issue that we can cover fully in 1.5 hours. It's a multi-dimensional issue. Hello. Speaking of culture and art, you know, we have a specific focus, but I had witnessed something interesting last summer, and it impressed me a lot. I didn't really do a lot of research on that, but I had a lot of question marks on my mind as I am on such a platform, and as I have a lot of people here that focus on the issue. I'd like to shoot a question that I'm curious about. Last summer, in a park, an autistic child of a friend of mine and another friend of mine has a normal kid, and the normal kid has a disabled sibling, and the autistic child received a terrible treatment from her peers, and the child with disabled sibling attacked those who treated him badly, and he started crying. You know, my question is that, you know, this very important issue regarding the children, do you have, I mean, are we really following an education policy to address the children? And do we have any programs to mix up the children? Could be like creative dramas, for example. Culture and art must be further involved. As a relative of a disabled person, I can basically give an example. Let me tell the legal perspective. If there's any other practice or if anything done by NGOs, our panelists could have their own perspective. In Turkey, I think the process should start with the human rights trainings on the children. You know, it could be a typical obstacle or neurodiversity obstacle. You know, from the legislation in education, you know, there are findings on such a training. But on neurodiversity and education, you know, this combined education, harmonization education is not really something that is wanted. So, you know, if there's a hyperactive student or a trouble student in the old way of saying it, you know. The teacher, you know, whom they see as the only adult for 7-8 hours, you know, yes, as millions of students are being looked down by their teachers, and the next generations acquire that from their teachers. From the Ministry of Education, there is no human rights training, and based on that, on special days, there are some activities being conducted, but none of them is a systematical effort. Some NGOs do visit the schools and put together organizations. Psychodrama experts are being also involved in these activities. As Çiğdem very valuably said, you know, we need to bring the public and private shareholders together, and with that, holistic approaches could be born. I'll just tell that, you know, it's not from the perspective of children. It also has to do with the adults as well, especially recently. You know, we are preferring to be together with the people that are like us. So this is kind of the invisible bubble. So when we have children, we treat them as such. So in the classroom of a child, if there is a disabled individual or a refugee or a different person, we don't want that to be in the class. The way to overcome that is to be open for diversity. In a meeting that we conducted with the provincial director of the education, the director said that the parents are pressing teachers, and teachers don't really know what to do, and they lose control. And with the protocol, with our protocol, you know, we have 31 disabled individuals, right? Visible or invisible disabilities. So when we go into places like that, you know, we designed workshop activities in line with the curriculums. So as they leave these workshops, you know, their perspective changes, and they realize that not everyone is like them, and the concepts of norm and normal do change. Normal for whom, according to what? This is being discussed, and that is a good thing. I'm normal and everyone else is abnormal. So this approach is far less than healthy. So we need to remove these bubbles and embrace each other. So, you know, there are hugging days, right? So we need to make it mandatory. You know, we should basically hug the one that we see with good intentions, of course. And we should spread that, because love increases as we share. So we should exhibit that, right? Thank you. I think one more question. We're going to have a concert afterwards. I'm going to ask a question to Hakan. In our field, that Dialogue Museum is one of the venues that offer concrete experiences. Give us concrete experience, examples of concrete experience. You know, when they leave the museum after 10 days, 3 months, do you have any concrete example that people say that they have done this or that? So you're doing something very concrete. Give us examples of that. So when we leave here, we would have an understanding, you know, what could be done, after we communicate with the Dialogue Museum. Do you have concrete examples? Of course, concrete examples. It's important to proliferate the role models. You know, in recent times in the scope of an EU fund, we basically wanted to collect feedback from over 100 individuals, disabled individuals who worked with us. And the whole story, I saw that in the UK, when there's a role model for audio or visually impaired or the other disability groups, when there's a role model, the other disabled individuals are impacted by the role model a lot, because it's not disabled individuals, it is the individual that is made disabled. So people think that I wouldn't have the opportunity and not take the action, so it brings an inertia. So we basically prepared a dialogue project, with the audio impaired people. We basically provided the barista training to deaf individuals. I saw something very similar in the UK. When the deaf children come in, they are, they have a hard time believing that this coffee is being provided by a deaf individual. They only rule that the order should be given in the sign language, right? So we have a lot of things like menus and things, but this alone is enough to change perspective. The example of dance, for example, as a concrete example, we have 8 individuals from different disability groups. They exhibit a good performance, and this changes the perspective. This perception of not being able to do, it changes, it turns into things that could be done. Sometimes they ask me how many individuals are disabled from among us, and I say, even if I go to a council, a medical council, they would basically give me a report on disability as well. So it's just, except for me and a few other individuals, everyone else is disabled. I mean, the number of disabled individuals is a lot more than the number of non-disabled individuals, able individuals. So I'm proud of that, by the way. Thank you. Thank you all very much. And then we can move on with the mini concert.
Hi all, welcome back. I'm Subash Bu. I'm Arts Manager and EDI Equality, Diversity, Inclusion Lead for the British Council. We are gathered here today at the second day of Unlimited Forum Arts for All Festival. We are at Yapı Kredi Montia'da and online on British Council Turkey YouTube channel. So welcome all. We are around 60-70 here in the room, and I hope that we are way more. There are way more people online as well. I just want to briefly introduce what the festival is all about for the ones that only arrived today or are just only logged into our YouTube channel. It's a 3-day festival that is the first time that we're doing it in Turkey, but has a huge legacy, and we want to follow it up here in Turkey, showcasing best examples of disability and inclusive arts from Turkey, from the UK, and from the wider Europe region as well. And the main aim is to create a safe and inclusive space for everyone, not only artists and creatives, but audience as well, where we could be ourselves, we could share our experience, and we could learn from each other. That's very important for us. So I'm looking forward to hear from our guests today, coming from UK, Georgia, Serbia, and the Ukraine as well. It's a relaxed venue, it's a relaxed event. So as we said, as just said, please be yourselves. We are among friends, and we're looking forward to hear your questions, hear your comments, and hear your experience as well. So both online and in the room, please do ask questions, and we'll have a great discussion at the end of the panel. And without further ado, I leave it to you, Neil, to introduce the panel. And thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the second half. I'm delighted to be here and to be joined by 4 I'm sure will be brilliant speakers. So I'm going to start by introducing them and myself, and I will ask them also to describe themselves. And then I will come back and we'll start to investigate their work and whether or not, in fact, accessible art is a big myth, or will we, in fact, have something to talk about. So first to say, my name is Neil Webb, and I'm Director of Theatre and Dance at the British Council. And in British Sign Language, which I'm much more familiar with, that's my name. I'm a 50-something white man, about 182 centimeters tall, with increasingly gray hair, and I'm wearing a very bright blue cardigan today. My distinguished panel, I'm going to refer to my notes so that I hopefully pronounce everyone's name correctly. Starting at my far end, we have Kimberley Harvey, who is Director of Youth Dance at Candoco Dance Company. To her right is Anastasiya Voytyuk, who is Director of Unbeaten Path from the Ukraine. Next to Anastasiya is Marko Pejovic, who is the Executive Director of Off the Frame Van Oakvira from Serbia. And immediately to my left is Ketevan Zazanashvili, who has a few more titles. She is the Artistic Director of Tbilisi Inclusive Dance Company, and she is the founder and president of the Georgian National Wheelchair Dance Sport Federation. Amazing. Perhaps before I ask you to do anything else, if I could just ask each of you, starting with you, Kimberley, to describe yourself for anyone who might find that useful.
Hello, I'm Kimberley. I am a 30-something mixed-race woman with dark eyes, fake short red hair, and glasses, and I come with wheels in a bright blue chair.
This instead of applause, actually. Like, I think we have like a multi-emotional space.
Yeah.
My name is. Thank you, Kimberley, for being first or second. Like I will catch you to your thing about I'm 30-something. My name is Anastasiya, and I think when I'm awake in the morning I'm 162 centimeters, and in the evening only 160. And I also have dark hair, and it's a little longer. And I am in a jeans and in my lovely blue jacket, and with the heart in the colors of Ukrainian flag, blue and yellow in it. And I have a microphone, which is kind of hidden, but very, 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 very interesting. And I'm sitting on the chair.
Thank you. Marko.
It looks a little bit like we are on dating application. But I will not make myself prettier than I am. I'm male, 50 years old, having something orange and beige on me, bold, pretty, and more or less it is.
Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. So I'm also 30-something-year-old woman. 30-something. I have a very, very black hair and black eyes. I wear a skirt, a beige boots, and a shirt in a white and black colors like a chessboard. Yeah, that's it.
Brilliant. Thank you. Right, what I'm going to do next is ask each of our panelists to speak for a little bit more detail about the work that they do, of course, in relation to disability arts or accessible art, and several of them are collaborating, and perhaps to explain to us why you're all here. But if I could please start with you, Kimberley, if you'd like to kick us off and tell us a little bit more about you and the work of Candoco.
Yes. So, as Neil said, I am the director of the youth dance program at Candoco Dance Company. So I work within the learning team, and predominantly I am looking at creating inclusive dance opportunities in contemporary dance for disabled and non-disabled young people, and that crosses all disabilities, all physicalities, and all ways of being, with a variety of different kinds of projects. And having said that, my specialism is youth, but I also work within a wider learning department. And within that, we have a range of activities for everything from 11 youth all the way up to professionals. And then alongside of my Candoco role, I am also a freelance disabled dance artist, choreographer, and teacher.
And what's brought you to Ukraine? It's not just this panel, you've got something else going on as well.
I have indeed. So Candoco are currently working in partnership with Turkey and with Ukraine on the 3x3 duet project. So currently I am one of the duet partners with my partner Angel Tiro, who's down there, and we are all being choreographed on by Charlotte Derbyshire, Candoco's artistic director. So yes, this is the Turkey part of the project. We've done London, this is Turkey, and then we'll do the partner with Ukraine in March.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I mean, for anyone who's not familiar with Candoco, I think it's safe to say one of the world's most renowned inclusive dance companies. You established in 1991, I believe. So they've already had their 30th anniversary, and we've had the privilege over many years in the British Council of working with you in many, many countries. It's great to have you here. Anastasiya, would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do?
Yes. So I am a musician myself and a cultural manager. So these two roles are very sticked together. And now and last, I think last, is it my microphone?
I don't know.
No?
It's like...
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so
it's a lot of energy up here.
Yeah, last 9 approximately years, I lead an organization which is called Unbeaten, and it's a small organization which is doing projects in the field of culture, education and culture, and inclusivity in culture. And we started 22 years ago in Lviv, and we were one of the first organizations who started to work with inclusive art. So we were like these first who came to the theater and said, we would like to rent your theater. We have not much money and we wanted to be full accessible. 22 years ago. My mother and my father started this organization. Their goal was to bring families who raise children with disability close to society and give them more opportunities. As I also I'm connected to this topic personally, as we have in a family a person who faces that not everything is accessible for her. So, and then during these 22 years, we went through quite a long path, cooperating with many Ukrainian organizations and doing a lot of work with Poland and also before also Belarus. And then I think, if you can correct me, British Council Ukraine, but something like 7 years ago, Unlimited started to make paths in Ukraine. And I remember when I received an email, British Council Ukraine invites you to take part in the research about inclusive art in Ukraine. And I said, yes, yes, we waited for you more than 10 years. When British Council starts to do something, it's like the big boat coming. It will be something changing. Like we were small, we were micro, and said okay, and it changed a lot. So I remember last Unlimited forum In Lviv, I was there also in the panel speaker. And this was only beginning, and after that we had kind of, now we're here with Candoco, so maybe if looking these 5 years back, we did these small steps to be here now, making project together. And this is the very, very long path, but I'm happy we are doing this, and we met also with you, that panel, I remember you from, and this is a very long way and very deep way. So I'm happy to be here with you, and I will be happy to share how is accessibility now in Ukraine, what we are facing.
I'm sure everyone's very eager to hear more, and we will come back to that definitely. But first, over to you, Marko.
Well, in inclusive art, I have a little bit multiple personality disorder because I work a lot. First, I started working as a producer and cultural manager, then as a director, as a dramaturgy for dance, then as a movie director, writing for the theater, and all those things. For 15 years, the organization that I'm working with, this is a Grupa Haide Da. In Serbian, in English, it is Group Let's, like invitation to do something together. The organization for the last 50 years opened a space so people, first people with disability and artists can work together. And after that, soon we started to work with different sensitive groups. It was not just people with disability, but also LGBT community, war veterans, young people from rural area, etc. And sometimes we gather all of them in the same space. So you have dancing workshop with pupils from a ballet school, but also for war veterans and for people in wheelchair and deaf and blind person and somebody from LGBT community, etc. So for us, it is much more interesting to do the things in community and with community. So the festival that British Council pick one of my identity, it is executive director of this festival.
It's the one on my page,
One Okvira or Off Rain is the festival that we made as a platform to people to come together and to work together. First, we curated the festival, but then we started to invite it wider audience to curate it. So first, people just came and say what they want to see on the festival and what they are able to do in the festival. So if you take responsibility for your suggestion, then you can participate. And on that way, the whole festival started to be curated by the audience. And then we did some crazy stuff, like one moment we did a lot of political issue in Serbia and we wanted to address them. So we didn't have idea how to develop in political way in Serbia for next 10 years. And we invited people to bring their sleeping bags and to sleep in the theater and to start envision of a new country. So people started to like those small things that find somehow supportive. And always we do it in accessible space with sign language translation, with audio narration for blind people, etc., etc. So in this moment we are on a break a little bit with the festival because we need some new inspiration where we would like the festival go further.
Thank you.
And one moment, we started our dance, inclusive dance practice with Candoco dancers. They came to Serbia, it was 2008. And they start first education for us. That was Victoria Melin and Pedro Machado in that period. So they are now
long time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago.
I mean, you spoke about the British Council being like a big boat. I think Candoco's legacy across the world.
For us, Candoco.
Yes, absolutely. Ketevan.
Yay!
Yay.
You will hear a lot of that kind of sounds from me. So, so wow. Always when they ask me, I don't know where to start from.
The beginning.
So the beginning. Beginning, originally, I am political scientist, but I was a ballroom dancer. So everybody asks how you get into a wheelchair dance, or how do you get into inclusive dance. So one time I was in Poland because I was a ballroom dancer, so we were competing. So I saw a wheelchair dance sport show in one of the competitions. So it sparked my interest, and somehow, like a destiny, like when I came back in 2013 to Georgia, British Council organized, and of course, a workshop with Candoco Dance Company. So at that time, we were experimenting. Like I came back and I was like interested, because this was my first breaking my own barrier of understanding what a dance world can be. When I saw this performance of wheelchair dance sport. So I felt like I want to do that in Georgia. And when I came back into Georgia, my trainer told me like, there is this interesting workshop, do you want to join? So I was like, yes! So that was my second eye-opening, because I never saw a dance theater with people with disabilities. So, and non-disabled dancers together. I was like, oh my God, I want to do that too. So that's how I connected to British Council, Candoco Dance, and I found my first partner with whom we just start to improvise. So this is how it led to another project, to another dance partner, a wheelchair dance partner, who kind of dragged me to go to Georgia's Got Talent. I was like very skeptical of this show. I was like, what? What are we gonna do that? And then it led to our victory on this show. So we won Georgia's Got Talent in 2015, and I'm very proud that after that, this program always had disabled artists or people with disabilities perform or take part in the competition. So that was a trigger to where I wanted to form a wheelchair dance sport federation, because dance sport is a kind of para sport. Something like you can see on Dancing with the Stars, but it's the same for wheelchair dancers. And when I started it, because this is what I knew most, and when I get ties with the Candoco Dance Company more, and after our victory, people with other disabilities and families started to call, maybe you can do a class for us too. So this is how the idea of Tbilisi Inclusive Dance Company come in. So we just started with a small class, and then there was an initiative group, and then we are like 8 dancers with and without disabilities. So we have 2 directions. This is para sport, and there is an inclusive dance theater we are doing. So basically, this is what we are doing now. After pandemics, it hit us, but like I will tell you about the plans if you have the question coming up.
We will come back to those,
yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. I've also just learned we have something in common.
Yeah.
I was not on Britain's Got Talent,
no.
But I did study politics and dance.
Yes.
No, see?
Cool.
Right. Thank you, everybody. Let's kick off. Let's start with, let's address the myth. Accessible art. Is it a myth, Kimberley? And well, what does it mean to you? Big question to start with.
I'll try. I'll start. So no, it is not a myth. So we all have a reason to be here. No, it is not a myth. I think for me, for Candoco, for inclusive dance practice, I like to see it as finding the different ways in for people. As human beings, we have keys that make us into the human beings that we are. Keys unlock doors. And I think with accessible art or dance or inclusive dance, it's about finding the right keys for different people and different combinations. And whether that's in teaching practice or in performance work. And I think it's interesting because I think in terms of the accessible art that we make, I think, of course, there is captioning, there is audio description, there is sign language, and there is continually an evolving practice into what accessible performance is. but I think it would be a myth to suggest that we know all the ways to do it. I think we need to keep digging, and that is a practice that needs to keep evolving.
And how have you seen that evolve in the UK specifically? I mean, we will come on to your influence, your global influence very soon.
So, for the UK's position currently, I think we are at a stage now where, particularly since the pandemic, there has been a real movement to say it's not enough that there are some opportunities. It's not enough to say, oh, there are some places that, in this case, disabled people can go and find, for example, artistic or dance opportunities. It's the fact that, and it's not enough that it's just a inclusive space, to interrogate what that actually means and what it means, and then by extension, for Candoco specifically, what that means for Candoco. Because I think often in the UK, the term inclusive has now become incredibly broad and encompasses, which is a good thing, and it encompasses an awful lot. And that's brilliant, and we should all be striving to constantly work more inclusively. But I think what sometimes happens is that those companies that do specialize in particular areas can get, a lot gets asked of them, and maybe, so actually, there is a real value in being able to specify where our specialism, for want of another word, is, so that we can say, we've got 30 plus years of experience in this, we're still learning, and there's still more work to do, but so that we don't get, and also so that we share the load, also acknowledging that there are, as is evidenced on this panel, there are skill sets that are being shared, and there's learning that happens all the time. But I think within the UK now, there is really an interrogation of what inclusivity means, and it's not enough to say, oh, well, of course it's inclusive. It's actually, what does that mean? And do I feel like I'm part of the space? Because I think, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, and it leads very nicely, because Anastasiya, we had a very brief conversation yesterday evening about the Ukrainian context, which I can't even begin to imagine the challenges that you are facing. And you started to speak about the shifts in what inclusion is, or what it was, and what it's becoming. Can you elaborate a bit more? Do you remember what we were talking about?
Yes.
Yes, good.
I
Maybe you can be more eloquent than me.
Yeah, it's I'm aware. I passed like kind of difficult emotions to you yesterday, but I'm happy you know the context. And if I can, I would say our life in Ukraine and Ukrainian inclusion has now two parts: before and after, before invasion and after invasion. And let me have a small look what was before invasion, because it was quite a lot. And let me give you an example of the institution which appeared in Ukraine and which supported inclusive art and accessibility a lot. And actually, British Council Ukraine has also supported creation of this institution by consulting inclusive art direction. I'm speaking now about Ukrainian Cultural Foundation. And by analyzing on what they were giving money, what they were supporting, I would like to show you how inclusive art and accessibility was looking like in Ukraine before war started. So Ukrainian Cultural Foundation appeared, I think, there were long process, but the 4 grand seasons were like 4 years of very good grand seasons, Ukrainian fund, and unbelievable things. Like we were all very happy. And they had separate direction for inclusive art. Wow, it's amazing. We were supported by this fund almost every year we applied. And there were 3 directions. First direction, it was accessibility of the cultural institutions. And the second direction was the supporting of the inclusive arts. So different organizations, maybe art projects, maybe therapeutical projects. And the third was supporting the ideas of the artists with disability. And when, of course, we were usually applying to the third one, and guess like the third one had usually the minimum financing. So the biggest funds, hi there, yes,
Oh.
and the biggest funds, okay, were usually for this first one. Before the Ukrainian Cultural Foundation starts supporting the accessibility of the theatrical buildings, films, cinemas, etc., this moved really slowly. So we could be using, renting the theater in Lviv, like for 10 years, and they didn't install a pandus, for example, yes? Or they didn't change the toilets. Ramp, thank you. But then after the financing appeared, increased the interest of the all cultural organization who have buildings to receive this financing, and through this money also increased. Then when they started working this, when they were closer, then this human factor started to appear. Okay, why we need to make this accessible? Not only to make our building better, not because people matter, so people in the first place, but this was this scenario, and it was developing quite good, and there were appearing new directions, and we were taking part in the focus groups how to make this better, this finance. And I think in some, I would be very pessimistic, 5-6 years we will come back to a situation which was years ago. Even like we don't know, yeah, maybe faster. But then let me have a very simple, a quick look what happened after 21st of February when Russia attacked and occupied Ukraine. So like people with disability are very feel, I have a sister with a disability, that's my personal story, feel very vulnerable and could not defend themselves. So they feel this war really deep and really personal. And those were people who were actually one of the first to be evacuated from Ukraine. So many, I do not know number of people with disability who were evacuated, but over 7 million people left Ukraine. It's a lot. And then now people with disability are around the world. Some of them are coming back to Ukraine, but also we can see as our organization works, the focus of Ukraine. We had kind of very good focus on inclusivity and accessibility. Now focus is on displaced people and on war. Like we need to win a war, then we can fix other things. So we need to support army, we need to support displaced people. And then we were speaking with the Ukrainian team today. You barely find some financing to support inclusive projects like before. All the funds which are now available for Ukrainians are for supporting displaced people, kids, psychological help. Like this is what we are all doing. And we are kind of blessed here with Unbeaten Path team that we can do this artistic project. But all the team, British part, Turkish part, experience how it's to work with the people who come from the war. And it affects the budget. We cannot fly from Ukraine. We need to come through the border to Poland, to Hungary. Takes a lot of time and money and effort, and then fly. We do not have a lot of electricity, so person with disability can just come down on the lift elevator and stuck for 4 or 8 hours there. And it's like, this is what we face. Sorry for telling such stressful things, but we live in this. And we are happy to be here in a safe situation together with you to share this. And we ask, let's move forward, we would like to do art in spite of anything, in spite of war. So this is these words which I'm saying. We agreed together with the Ukrainian team. So this is not only mine, but also 2 artists who are members of Ukrainian team, and one of the artists cannot live in Ukraine because of the safety. Like Kyiv region is very in danger, so the artist moved to Germany to feel safe, just to feel safe, and another artist decided to stay in Ukraine. Everyone has his and her decisions, and then it took 30 hours to come here from Ukraine to Turkey through the Budapest. So like, yes, this is, I know this is stressful, but we would like to share this because this should end. This should end. Thank you.
Thank you. I find it equally humbling and yet also somehow inspiring that despite all of that, you are making art. Wow. Marko, sorry, that's a rather tough act to follow. Suddenly make every other situation slightly pales in comparison, but if you would please.
What was the question?
Well, I just ask you to talk a little bit about the context in which you're operating.
Yeah, this what you said just now, it reminds me on the difficult period during 90s.
Yep.
Because this is a period also that NATO invaded Serbia and Montenegro also, and it was difficult to follow, to travel, to do everything generally in life. And even then, some organization of people with disability continue working, even it was difficult to live. But we started working in an inclusive context in 2000 when the political change had already happened. And now it is also a really tough political situation because there is a Kosovo issue and such things. And also the whole focus is always on hot political things, not on inclusivity, because it is never a priority. And but in this moment we starting always we thought about how to involve broader audience, broader society in communication about inclusivity. So first we started with inclusive dance production, and first few years we said, yes, this is a production with people with and without disability, but then stop saying it, just saying we are doing contemporary dance. This is the company that, or people that we are doing it, and start speaking about that there are dances with and without disabilities. But people already knew what we are doing. So people just came to see the art and then find or didn't find sometimes, because when you have a deaf dancer, people don't recognize it as a disability, person with disability at all. So after the performance, they're coming to us, you cheated us, there is no person with disability there. But then we started to think, okay, we would like to have a festival that invite a lot of people to come and to see. Then we started to do more with short movies, and things all the time somehow developed by having some feedback from the people that we are doing. Because when we started doing things with the dancers, they say it will be good to do some dance video or dance movie, you know. So all the time we didn't have a plan that we wanted to organize things, but we just always were open to receive feedbacks and then develop things further.
Thank you. I want to ask you, just to shift things slightly, how your audiences have evolved, because you also have a very public
Yeah.
You have a celebrity profile because of your
No.
and that must
Yeah,
have had influence in how your company is perceived and how hopefully audiences have
Yeah. I would
changed,
say
grown.
maybe we were lucky
Mhm.
because it happened, but it didn't happen because like, oh, there was a disabled person dancing on because it was a very good production, like it was a very good dance. If you will see, it's high quality thing. This is what I learned from UK experience, to be honest, So definitely social media or TV helps, but still people don't watch that much of a TV. Or in Georgia, we are happy that social media like Facebook is very much helping us to promote it. But still, it's hard to reach people with disabilities where they are because some of them don't have access to internet, or they don't have TV at home, or they're just still locked at home, and they are not actively going out. So the biggest problem for us as a dance company or as an organization is actually physically accessible place, just to have, because like let's say I will be honest, and I was dragging this by by begging for spaces basically, and there are just very few accessible spaces in the hometown of Tbilisi. I cannot imagine, because I work also as a volunteer in the regions to make some integrative dance practices, and this is a disaster, I will tell you. But this is what was the focus, like still continuing work, like without even having this barrier. But really, it's a very hard barrier, like to find the space where to gather these people. First is like to find the space, the first step, and then I'm sure like the Candoco was through this like 40 years ago, like 25 years ago they started, but like UK started this 40 years ago, and we started it like 7, 8, 9. So we are just a baby steps. We are really micro organization, but the context is like after pandemics, it's even harder to get people interested to come out and do something, because like people are now like, I can work from home, but like this is something that I would like to be feasible. Yes, this online connection is very amazing for some people, because they get us the access to another people who are interested in inclusive dance, who are at home and they cannot come out. But like I would like it to be physically accessible, So then there is a problem, like where is the focus actually of our like Anastasiya said, like the focus shifted because Georgia is also bordering with Russia, and the political focus is more into social media. Everybody is about the war, what will happen, will Georgia be involved, and then it shifts everything completely out of the arts and towards this thing. So we are really, but I'm very blessed that we are still connected in the way with the British Council and now with the US Embassy. So I decided just to take another way. So I decided to invest my own funds and actually build an accessible space. This is what I need right now, because we were we were trying to do our work this way, that way, by begging out the spaces. But I said like to myself, let's stop this and let's do a bigger step for us. So I decided to invest in this and create like an inclusive arts hub. Let's omit this inclusive. It will be an arts hub, diversity arts hub for people with and without disabilities.
Amazing. When's it opening?
In a 1.5 year, hopefully. Thank God. Let's keep fingers crossed.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I think, there are very, very different contexts that all of you are operating in. And Kimberley, I don't know how you feel, but sometimes in the UK it feels like, one step forward, 2 steps backwards. And while it's in no way comparable to being invaded, obviously the politics and the pandemic has had huge influence. Would you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I think
You don't have to.
No, so the UK, in some contexts, is sometimes seen as a leader in terms of inclusivity, and I can understand that from, you know, the companies that come out. Like, you know, I feel very fortunate that not only do I now work for Candoco, but I, as both a young dancer and then an emerging and training dancer, benefited hugely from Candoco's and what they offer and show. And without them, I wouldn't know that, you know, it was possible to dance and have a disability. But I think I think the UK is in quite. We get away with a lot because we are thought to be at one of those at the front in terms of inclusivity. And that was before the pandemic. So I think you then add the pandemic in, and actually what the pandemic highlighted was the reality of the inequity and inequality of our society. And absolutely is it in no way comparable to these situations. But for the UK, it was quite shameful to hear that there were disabled people during the pandemic who, let alone doing artistic work or their jobs, they couldn't get the social support. You know, their carers, support workers, to come in and get them out of bed. There wasn't, you know, funds had gone awry, and there wasn't, and that provision just somehow went away. And I think also the language around the pandemic, around vulnerability and clinical vulnerability, and etc., I think has set things back in terms of perceptions of disability and people, because actually vulnerability in and of itself is a beautiful thing. And actually when we're able to show each other that as human beings, that is, I think, one of the most beautiful things. But when it is attributed to a group of people because of what they ultimately cannot do, that's where we start to have problems. And I think the pandemic has accentuated some of that for the disabled population.
Absolutely. Do any of you want to comment on that? Or, yeah, yes, please.
I have.
That I won't move on just yet.
Like vulnerability, this is something which resonates in me a lot. Because this is something which experience people with disability. And I remember my mother told me, we were talking, she said, we will never understand how people with disability feel, because we are others, so it's not possible. And then what I would like to share with you, and what probably can sound a little bit too provocative or maybe too much, but I would say Ukrainians are now with disability, all of us, and I feel this disability, and I feel this because of vulnerability. It's like we are not, none of us is okay. And I think a couple of months ago, I said to myself, maybe I know a little bit how people with disability feel, because I feel disabled. Not being able to do something, not being able to travel, and also psychological state. We face different post-traumatic syndromes. This has totally changed everything, changed perspective. And UK, of course, your restrictions in COVID, they're very strict. Not in Ukraine, we were less chill. We will chill. That's why this isolation, which people with disability, like I can observe it in my personal life, in our family. It's like literally people are sometimes locked couple of years, actually, like COVID war. They are just locked in their houses, or like, and this vulnerability bring us to our beginnings. We can do art when we feel safe. Like art is a consequences of the I can share something, and I can share something when I have a ground, and when my ground is damaged by COVID, by politics, by insecurity in the country. Like Georgia, you can feel this tension. Like Poland, feel this tension. Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Finland, Belarus. This is then many of artists saying, with disability and without disability, I don't feel movement. I don't feel music inside of me. I'm just like doing it, but I don't feel it because of very much internal stress. And this is the question to all of us, the community. I know we would like to talk about accessibility, but let's talk on the people on the first place. Like we make accessibility for people. And I think mental health issues are now very important. Accessible, it's also part of accessibility, person to be able to appear in the world, in the arts.
Art is a reflection of our society. Artists imagine, they reimagine, but they also reflect. And I mean, are we in a global sort of stagnation at the moment, post-pandemic, political crisis, war, threat of war? But you're all still making work.
Yeah. I believe that. I don't know. I also inspire my dancers just to find the way out of the crisis. I mean, find the flower in the crisis. I don't know how to say. Find some seed even in the crisis. Maybe we can use it. Maybe we can use our stories to create another stories. Yeah, to send the message through the performances. You can translate the pain also. It should not always be beautiful. I mean, you can send the message through this, and you can show what it feels like when you are in the crisis, and then you can create the movement out of not movement. You know, I think so.
Marko, you spoke earlier about sort of the collective curation, the audience-led approach to your festival. How is that reflected in the work that's being created or shown? Has it changed? Are there any evidence of current situations?
Well, we are on a line that art belongs to everybody and everyone, and that in every situation can force you to do art if you don't have other means of expression, you know, or doing something. So when you are facing human suffering, it is always really connecting force for the society. And one thing that happened during the pandemic is that in Serbia, a lot of people didn't know that people with disability has really huge obstacles in everyday life. For example, when you had lockdown and that period, Friday evening to the Monday, it was not able. You were not able to go out from your home, and I'm speaking for Belgrade, the capital city of Serbia. That in that moment, city council didn't recognize that sign language translator should be free to go, because in that moment somebody is in hospital or in jail or somewhere, and you need translation for it. So then with some artists, with some people with disability, we did a series of video arts when they speak what obstacle they faced in that moment. So starting speaking this situation, and we had one guy who has some kind of disease that he's really vulnerable to any kind of viruses. And he was the first person with this kind of diagnosis to be in the hospital, and the whole system collapsed because they didn't know what to do with him in this situation. And those stories, we made a lot of video arts and made some kind of video installation, and a lot of people come to see it. And then the dialogue started to appear about what really happened in that period. And it was a year after the pandemic, the lockdown was finished in that sense. So we really need to find different formats to make dialogue about discrimination and violation of human rights and such things. So, but this come also from the people we need to speak about. We don't find a way. Can we make some video art, video discussion first? Because this was interviews with them, and from those material we made about 11 videos that were showed on the exhibition.
Most of us spent, well, perhaps more so in some places than others, spent a lot of time at home watching the world through a screen on 2D. And now that you are creating work again, creating work together, has that changed since the pandemic? Anybody?
Yes. And I think in terms of, well, I think in terms of all of Candoco's work, it's made us more aware of both how we make, but also who we're making for and where those people are. And the fact that actually there are people who, first of all, what can be done in the performance space, whether that is a more conventional performance space and what accessibility means in those spaces. But also I think a question for us in terms of accessibility is, and we saw it for everybody during the pandemic, Zoom was what everybody was using, or Skype, or, to connect with people. And actually the reality is that for some people with disabilities, that was an amazing discovery. And actually it gave them a sense of ownership and empowerment and control and choice that they never had before. And for other people, it was completely exclusionary. It didn't work for them at all, or they didn't have the tools or the support to access that. And in some ways, even in the UK, it was the reality of a disabled person not having access to the internet, and not having the support in place to be able to access the internet. Which I appreciate is different, but we're along these sort of baselines of things that for a lot of us, access to internet is a pretty day-to-day thing. I, for one, work at home far more now than I did. Exactly. And, that's something that we have come to, or in the UK, come to be quite complacent about. And, and we moan when our Wi-Fi buffers and it all goes a bit wrong. But therefore, there are proportions of people who, or there's questions around, because we also, bringing our classes back, we're not getting, particularly with young people, participation has changed. disabled young people are not as readily coming to spaces. It was hard enough to get young people sometimes into spaces as it was. Now, we have had to change things drastically, and we are still figuring out what that means. And therefore, by extension, where does digital sit for Candoco? And that is something that I know we as a company are wanting to look at more.
You're nodding, and that resonates. I think, does that resonate with all of you?
Even if it's not an art, any other field, people don't want to go out somehow because I don't know, is this a comfort zone, or maybe they are just still in the stress of going. I don't know. Somehow it affected mentally a lot. So maybe it's a fear still that they will get something. So really, it's hard to get people physically connected again. So maybe it will be a mission of arts to get us connected again physically.
I think so. I mean, I can honestly say it's what got me reconnected with society again, was art, performance, particularly. I was becoming far too comfortable at home in my own little world, lived out through a screen. So yes, thank you to all of you who are making work and getting us back out again. I'm conscious of time, and that's I've been hogging the conversation. So perhaps we should see if anybody out there would like to ask any questions of our panelists, or indeed share any personal stories, comments. We are very open. Jill, in the front. Oh, and behind you there is somebody. I think Sue's going to come around with. There we go. Thank you. And if you could, when you speak, describe yourself and say who you are. That would be very, very helpful.
Oh, hello. I'm Jill. I'm the director of the British Council here in Turkey. It was a fascinating discussion. Thank you to all the panelists. I have a question which is stimulated by something Anastasiya said. And I was thinking that unfortunately we can imagine that as a result of the war, there may be a lot more disabled people in Ukrainian society once the war ends. And I wondered if you had any thoughts about the potential for the healing power of the arts in the post-war Ukraine.
Yes. Thank you for that project. And of course, that's an issue that we are already facing from 2014 when the war started. I can say you in experience, I've been participating in the one performance where the goal was to bring together professional opera singers, kids, people who are how to say it, like all older people, women and soldiers. And maybe you probably can guess which group was the most difficult to involve to. What we can experience and what we will be experiencing in Ukraine, that this inclusive art that we are doing now and inclusivity for the people who came after war, who were damaged by war, not only soldiers, but also civilians. You know, a lot of civilians lost their parts of bodies because of explosions. So like hundreds of people. And actually we are about to discover and develop new methods of rehabilitation, socialization, and it's a work for the decades. It's a work for many. But what I was thinking, maybe Ukraine can be in 10 years the most accessible country in Europe, because I remember, just have a quick look. I was 7 years ago in Lebanon, and I came there and asked, can you give me a brief view of society? Who is where? And they said, okay, military people, doctors, professors. And I said, wow, military in the first place in Ukraine now will be. So the people who will be cherished a lot, we trust them a lot, they defend us now, yes? The state will be, this will be focus number one, how to support them, how to answer their needs. And this will influence inclusive art too. I think the new building orders are coming to, I hope there will be less corruption. There should be less corruption. Like these all cultural centers which are destroyed, when they will be rebuilt, I really hope they all will be accessible. And this is a new chance for Ukraine. And your question is, like, there should be like many conferences on this topic, and we need the help of the cultures who has gone through the war to help us, because it's a lot of work now.
Thank you for that and for your message of hope.
Yes.
And I'm sure everyone here and online wishes you all the very best for the future.
Thank you from the whole Ukrainian team.
If you pass the microphone behind you, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Hi, my name is Meral. I'm Turkish, and I'm working as an art psychotherapist here in Turkey. So thank you so much. This is my first day in the panel, and I learned a lot from like what you were sharing with us. And like I am wondering, because nearly all of you were mentioning about mental health status. I'm wondering, is there any application which is involving psychosocially diverse groups as well? Because we can see physically disabled people easily, and we can maybe like do something to involve them in the art. But for mentally diagnosed people, it's a bit hard for them to just involve in the art because they're isolated. They're stigmatized, and it's really hard for them to just be involved. And I'm wondering, in the world, is there any examples that you can share which is also involving some of the other diverse groups as well?
Thank you. Does anyone want to, while you think about that, I just want to say to all of you in the audience, if you want to ask a question in Turkish, that's fine. We have interpreters. Similarly, if you want to use sign language, we have interpreters. Don't feel that you have to speak English.
One year on the festival came a group of psychiatric service users. And they said, okay, we would like you to do some workshop with us because we saw how you do the workshop with people with disabilities. So we would like to dance. So this is a NGO that has a member of people who had some history of hospitalization, psychiatry system, etc. And they just saw something that they like and they just approached. So it can happen. And in one moment we had we had people with disability and people with psychiatric user surveys and artists all together on the workshop. And after 4 or 5 days of a workshop, we had a presentation for the audience. And then so much people come to see it, even some department of psychiatric institution, they brought their people who are on healing process there. So they all come together, and it was so many people in the space that we couldn't have so many people in that moment, you know. So I think that if the information is a key element for that. If they have the information, what you can offer in the space, then some of them have a courage to approach and to do it. This is one thing that I also would like to line, that a lot of them was in remission, so they were in that moment in good health and feeling that they are good. But even for them, it was really some space for sharing the experience and to dance together. So it can happen. I just want to say.
I was just going to say, I think there's something for me around area of expertise and responsibility and care. And I think first of all, to acknowledge as human beings, we all have mental health that can all vary massively for a whole variety of situations and reasons. But also to say that I personally, and within Candoco, we all of us have different areas of interest, of curiosity. But for example, in Candoco, none of us are mental health professionals. So if we were going to work with a specifically recruited group of individuals with mental health needs, I would also be really keen and interested in collaborating with professionals from the mental health profession to ensure that we were supporting the participants as much as they needed. Because with the best will in the world, I don't have that knowledge. I have maybe some experience or I've learned various things for various reasons, but I am not a mental health professional. And I think that's really key, what you were saying, of where are those people at that are coming to you? Are they actually ready for that opportunity?
Which is where you come in. Yeah.
Yeah, you remind me that to underline that we always have in some broader team a psychology, psychotherapist, dancers, choreographers, people with disabilities, different people who are in team and can support and suggest the method that we would like to introduce.
I've thought of two examples while they've been speaking, if it's useful. There's a UK artist who goes, his art's name is The Vacuum Cleaner. He makes work with and about and in the context of mental health and mental health institutions. And he's collaborated with an amazing Indonesian artist called Hannah Madness, who also makes work from her own lived experience. But they have done a lot of work about, as artists, reimagining and recreating and the mental health institutions and what it means for somebody to be in one from their own lived experience. You can Google them, or I can write them down for you later. But they do really, really, really interesting work I've just thought of. And I'm sure there's many, many other examples.
Thank you so much.
Does anybody else out there want to say anything or ask anything? No? No? Right, well then, before we wrap up, I think we should just make sure that everyone's had an opportunity to say exactly what they want to say. So let's go in reverse, let's go this way this time.
Okay.
Accessible arts.
Yeah.
It's not a myth. Is there anything else you'd like to say on the subject before we draw to a close?
I just wanted to wrap up with maybe a message. I always do. So you could see like 4 different people from 4 different countries with a hugely different context. Yeah. Just I wanted to say where we are at right now in Georgia and where is my perspective as a non-disabled person who is running an organization. So my aim is like, it was a lighten up for me, and it was an example of a bigger countries like UK. So my aim is to actually create, let's say we pioneered it, like create accessible atmosphere within Georgia where actually there will be more people with disabilities who are the artists by themselves, who run the organizations, who are the dancers and choreographers themselves. This is the idea, this is the accessibility actually. So you can have the professional pathway regarding your form of the body, your ideas, etc., etc. This is the space. This is the path that you can take, actually. So I really want Georgia also to be a successor, and to have the disabled professionals running the organizations. Yeah, and perhaps 50 years ago, accessible arts was a myth, but not anymore thanks to this kind of people. Yeah.
Thank you. Marko.
I had some really bright idea, but it's lost now.
We can come back to you if you like.
My mind doesn't work always as I want to. Maybe, yeah.
I'm sure Anastasia's
ready.
Got something profound to share with us.
Okay. What we experiencing now, we actually are. By the way, like we are here, but today is also the last day of the residency, which is second residency, and we have been to London, as Kimberley mentioned, and we are going almost to Ukraine, to the Poland near Ukrainian border. But art is something we are cherishing, yes, and art comes from people, and people live real lives, and they face with their body, with their minds, accessibility. And what I felt and I feel accessibility as an attitude. I'm a person, and this is my attitude towards the world, toward the other people. Do I see inaccessibility around me? And if I see, what I do? Do I close my eyes, as it was like many, many years, as like I see elevator is not working? Do I go and say, okay, let's fix it? If I see there is no ramp, do I write a petition? Do I say, hey colleagues, let's put money together, let's make the Trump? Do I see like our kids from performance experience that somebody was like kids with a sight impairment, somebody was trying taking their glasses off and make fun of them? Do I come and say why those kids cannot do this? And do I do some action? Like accessibility depends on each of us, on each of us. Each of us can do something for accessibility. And if you can just right now in your mind say 3 things you can do next time, close time, to make this world more accessible, each of us, then I will be very thankful for you, and thank you for having such a great conversation and being so open. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to wait? Or yeah? Kimberley?
Shall I go? So I was add on to Anastasiya's actually. We're all human beings. We all have different needs, and we all deserve to be treated with equity. And when that doesn't happen, our ability to make art and to focus on the art is negatively affected. So I would ask you to think about what are the things that you treasure as a human being, and could a disabled person be asked to compromise on that? And chances are, somewhere, somebody is asked to compromise on something that, for one of us personally, actually we see as something that we treasure as a freedom or something that we take for granted. And it's not to say that we can change those things, but to first and foremost have an awareness that, yes, of course it is about the physical things, whether I can get on a stage, but it's also about choice, it's about ownership, it's about independence, it's about support, it's about being able to be with other human beings that we want to be with. And if we don't have those fundamental things, actually, the art will come, the art is there. We know, all of us know that creativity is there and it can be brought out of people. That's the wonderful thing. But also it's about how we treat those people. And then they can experience it in those artistic environments as well.
Thank you.
So, inclusivity in art is a story about nobody to be left behind. So if we speak about it, it still isn't happening, you know. But when we speak about contemporary dance, we already acknowledge that there are different able bodies on the stage, so it's happening. We just have to make some conditions to be really freely happening. And unfortunately, still it is a fight. When we did contemporary dance production, inclusive dance production, and in Serbia there is association of dance artists, and every 2 years they have some prize for dancers, companies, and 1 year somebody suggested we should receive it. And informal response was, but the dancers with disability are not professionally dancers. So when you ask them, what do you mean? They are not formally educated as a dancer. And then you ask, can they approach the building in formal education system? The answer is not. So you're punished not to receive a prize because the system doesn't help you to educate yourself and to be able to be part of this kind of society. So, but then the next year we also did a production, and we had one wonderful dancer. He's a deaf person, and many people approach us and say he should be prized this year because his solo is wonderful, and we don't have anything like this year. But I said, we can't do anything, I think, in this moment because association doesn't see him as a professional dancer. Then dancers started to write emails on the association, and that year they give some kind of special prize for him, and it was a little bit winning of this process, but colleagues start to understand how it is important to support him. So this kind of mutual support, even you are not this dancer with disability, but you see the colleague who is put in discriminated position, then you react, and then the situation may be changed. So majority needs to be those who make further steps.
I'm hearing a very similar thing from all of you here. I mean, it is not the sole responsibility of people facing systemic abuse or to demand change. You know, it is a collective responsibility.
Yeah, there was just, I will just share the phrase that's imprinted in my mind from the previous program. It's like, social change is a team sport. Yeah, so it's like, it's not something we are solely doing and creating change through our humanity, through empathy, but connection is another level of social change. Yeah.
Well, what a wonderful note to end on. Could I ask you all to please join me in giving a round of applause for our brilliant panel. Thank you all very much for your insights.
Woo!
And thank you, audience, both in the room and online. Thank you. Sue, over to you. What happens next?
Hello. Thank you all. We have a 10-15 minute break. Comfort break, and then we're back with Kaan Çelen Trio here. 15 dakika aramız var. Ondan sonra Kaan Çelen Trio yine sahnede olacak. Çok teşekkür ederiz bugün geldiğiniz için ve cuma öğleden sonranızı bize ayırdığınız için. Görüşmek üzere.